Great.
We're going live. All right, so we're live. Take it away, Alex.
Hi, everyone. All right. I'm checking the YouTube at the same time, so it's hard to see myself twice. But thank you for making the time. Thank you, On, and thank you, whoever is joining us to hear us today. Today will be actually about you, On. I'll introduce myself really briefly, and then I'll try to introduce you, but I'll let you do that, which you'll probably do much better than me. I'm Alex. I'm part of the team here at WIlco in charge of partnerships. And with me is On, our co-founder and CEO. You must already know what WIlco is all about if you're in this stream today. So I'll give you a quick intro about WIlco, and then I'll let him introduce himself and dive into his career. But in short, I met On here in my right at WIlco. He's the co-founder and CEO. On has vast experience managing development teams, and most notably as VP engineering at Handy and WeWork. He's also an angel investor, and he was working in VC as well in the past. But most important, he's married to an immunologist, and he's a father of 3. He's also a big fan of drums. He plays drums. He also sometimes shares with us some videos of him doing some music. And so that's on the personal level. But On, I'll let you dive. Look, there they are. I'll let you dive a bit more into your career and maybe take us a few steps back, and let's start from the beginning. Where were you when everything started, and how it got to where you are today?
Sure. Thank you so much, Alex, first of all. And thank you everyone who's joining us. Glad to have you with us today. Hopefully people will find my story interesting. It's hard to talk about myself, just about myself for so long, but I'll do my best. So I'm, I guess you could say I spent most of my career in engineering related roles. I've started writing code as a kid, about the age of 8, I think. I was using these booklets. So back in the day, in the 80s, in Israel, there was a series of booklets called Machshevet, and you learned the basic programming language. It was a thing back then. I don't know if basics, it's definitely still around and you can find it, but I don't think anyone is writing any code in basic these days. And these booklets were really cool, and pretty quickly you were able to write some pretty advanced stuff and doing graphics and things like that. So I did that, and as a teenager I started doing more and more and get into other languages as well. So most of my life I was basically tinkering with computers and trying to find cool things to do with them. Still doing it to this day, even though I don't write code for a living anymore. I don't program for a living anymore, but I still do it in my spare time because I do enjoy it. It's a hobby by now, kind of like playing the drums. It's one of the things I enjoy doing. Yeah, when I making my first steps in a career, that hobby of being a programmer and getting computers to do what I want them to do kind of became my job. So I guess that's how it started.
Were you exposed to something as a kid that made you want to pick up those like booklets and get started? Like, are you showing those booklets to your kids? How do we get people that young to get into this field?
Great question. So I was inspired by video games, whether it was in an arcade or in a console connected to TV or just, in a computer. And back then there was like one computer for the entire family, for everyone to use. And me and my siblings, we would load games into that computer and enjoy playing them, whether it's simple stuff like Digger. For those of you who remember, you would like dig holes and eat stuff, and you would have bad baddies chasing you. And what you would do is you would dig a hole and get like a bag of treasure coins to drop on the baddies. So Digger was one of them, Pac-Man, all the classics. But after a few years, Duke Nukem and the third-party shooters like Doom and Quake and all of these. But more importantly, the quests, the 80s quests by Sierra, one of which also inspired the name Wilco. So seeing all of those, I just wanted to do that too. How could I write those games? What could I do to get the computer to do all these cool things? So that's what inspired me. I wanted to show my kids the booklets. I couldn't get a hold of them. There is one person who promised me. She said that she has some copies at her parents' place and she's gonna find them and get them to me. If you're listening, you know who you are. I'm still waiting. You promised me about a year ago, but I couldn't get my hands on them just yet. But I did do Scratch programming with my kids. So for those of you who don't know, Scratch is a really cool project where you do visual type of programming. So you can like drag and drop blocks of functionality. And those blocks of functionality are highly graphical, both in the fact that it's visual, you just drag and drop to program, but also you have sprites and the code you write is responsible for that sprite, like how it moves, what it does, what it looks like, all of these, and whether it bumps into other sprites. So that's really cool because really easily you could build those types of games. And I really think that games are one of the best ways to learn. Not surprisingly, Wilco is, if you think that Wilco is some reflection of my character, then it's not surprising to learn that I think that games are a good way to learn. So just doing Scratch with my kids, and it's really cool. And when they have a school project, then they need to do something. And hey, what if we do this thing in Scratch? Here's like a game where we program the Noah's Ark and the animals walking into it. If it's one of their classes, or doing something in math. So really cool opportunities to do this with kids, and I highly recommend anyone with kids pick up Scratch. It's really cool.
Amazing. So let's flash forward a few years, because a lot of the people that are using Wilco are in a moment in their lives where they're graduating from college or from certain boot camp, and they're looking for those first steps into their engineering career. If we go back to yours, where did it all start? Where were the first steps that you took, and what would you have done differently if you could, if anything?
Yeah. So after high school and after joining the IDF, which is mandatory in Israel, I went to college and I started studying computer science. And I'm not going to knock off college. I think that computer science is really amazing. Like it opened up my eyes to so many different topics. But one thing I didn't realize before starting this is that there is not much relation between computer science and programming. It's one of those things where you have to, or not have to, but it seems like the natural way to get to a programming job. But unlike, being an accountant or a lawyer, where studying law or accounting actually makes a lot of sense as the first step towards that career, computer science is basically a domain within math. And like I said, super interesting. I loved it. I enjoyed every minute of it, but it doesn't actually prepare you for a career in programming. So I studied computer science. I think it was the third semester of my studies. There was a career fair in school, and one of the companies who came in was Applied Materials. And it was just a fluke, basically. I went out of operating system class, which is, operating system is one of the most hands-on classes in computer science. It's not hands-on at all, but it's one of the most hands-on classes in computer science. And it was just stepping out of operating system class and got into the career fair. And it just so happened that all of the questions that they asked me were about operating systems. So I aced that interview. I got called in for another interview, which I did well on, and got a job, not knowing anything. Basically, I kind of like to this day, I don't know how I managed to get this job. It was, more luck than anything else. And I appreciate the people who took the chance on me. And I remember walking into my first day on the job, and there was like a company onboarding, and I got through that. That was great. And then the team took me out, like the team I joined took me out for lunch. And through lunch, I realized that I have no idea what I'm supposed to do, what it means to work in a team. Now, I've written code before, but I've never worked in a team. I've never had anything in production. What am I doing? What is this thing that I joined? What am I supposed to do? Like, back in school, someone would give me a function and I would have to rewrite it or something like that. But where are the functions? Like, how is the code even stored and where? And what is this gigantic system that I now have to maintain and be a part of? And I have colleagues and they're working on the same code base. What are all these things? I've never done any of that. And I started getting imposter syndrome, which I don't know if it's fair to call it imposter syndrome, because in a way I was an imposter. I didn't know any of this. And that was quite a scare, to be honest. Like, I remember that lunch really well. I think I barely had anything to eat. And I was just thinking throughout this lunch, what the hell is going to happen after this lunch? And everyone's going to notice that I'm really out of my element here.
If only you had WIlco back then.
Yeah, exactly. And there was this huge 80-page onboarding document, and you would read through it and you still wouldn't understand anything. I mean, maybe if you had a few years of experience, you could read through this thing and actually understand what they're talking about. But I didn't know anything they were talking about. And this was a language, by the way, that I've never programmed in. So I really had no idea. I read through this document. And the good thing is that they didn't expect me to read through this document in one afternoon and just know everything. I was supposed to read through this document in like a few days, get my environment set up, my computer with everything on it. Most of it things that I've never done before. And the crazy thing is that, and maybe I'm jumping into your next question, but the crazy thing is this was a somewhat, you would say, dysfunctional team. So dysfunctional in the sense that throughout my tenure there, almost everyone between myself and the CEO of the company in Israel either quit or was fired. And I soon found myself reporting to the CEO, who I've never met. I've never met the CEO, but technically, like from an org chart perspective, I was reporting directly to him. And I had to, manage on my own. So I did, in the beginning, had a team lead, and she helped me quite a lot. But it was more like throwing me into the deep end. And she just gave me some general pointers. Like, I would try to fix a bug and I couldn't find my hands and feet. And she would say, just delete half of the code and see what happens. And that was actually, I use it to this day. Like, something goes wrong. All right, let's find where it is and do a binary search. This is half of the code. Just comment it out, see if the bug still happens. If it doesn't, great. I know it's in this half. If it does, if it does, great. I know it's in this half. If it doesn't, I know it's in the other half. And she gave me, all sorts of tips and tricks like that. But the cool thing is, because it was dysfunctional, so I was able to pick up quite a lot of things really quickly because I didn't really have a choice. So something would go wrong, I would get called on because there was no one else to call. So all of a sudden, I'm in charge of this area of the system where whenever something bad happens, I'm the person who's called. I get to field so many different situations, get tested in time crunch situations where I have to deal with something really quickly. And I was able to gain a lot of experience. This was just 1 year, by the way. But I was probably able to get like 5-6 years worth of experience within that year, just because of what the team was like. On the other hand, because it was, from a many perspectives, like I said, it was a dysfunctional team. I didn't get a lot of the experience when it came to more the soft skills. Like I didn't know how to deal with my colleagues in a good way. I did start developing a crazy ego because I was the person who gets called on to fix everything. And there's no one actually to put me in check and say, hey, relax, you're just just one person on this group of developers. So trying to balance things out, I got a lot of hard skills developed really quickly and a lot of soft skills developing really the wrong way, which I had to overcome later in my career and figure out how to handle those. So that's how I started. I wouldn't do anything differently. I don't believe in remorse. I don't think it's a useful emotion because I do believe in learning lessons. But I wouldn't change anything. That's what got me to where I am today, and I'm proud of myself. But I would say, if you're starting out, make sure that you're also picking up on soft skills and not just hard skills. Writing code is not the only thing that matters.
And this is actually something that we talk about all the time at WIlco. And I'm not a programmer myself, so I can't relate to it directly. But every conversation that we have and every time that we talk about what we're doing, and when we emphasize about you don't want to develop only your hard skills, but also the soft ones, because in the end, you're not working solo, you're working in a team with people. And what makes the business is not only the code behind that business, it's also the people that you work with. So we have a couple lessons here. One is develop both hard and soft skills, and second, delete half the code to understand where the bug is.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't fit every situation, but sometimes it's very useful. There are a lot of other debugging techniques. Don't just take this one, and only use it when it makes sense.
Let's go forward a few steps. What happens between this year in applied materials to working at Handy and all of a sudden leading a team of engineers and then WeWork? What happened in between? What did you learn along the way, and what could people learn from your experience?
Yeah, so in between, I was working at a startup and climbing up the ladder, climbing up the ranks, getting more and more managerial experience. And what happened was I had a really good hard skills, and I was able to get into a code base and quickly do something. And I was able to troubleshoot advanced scenarios. My soft skills were kind of weird though, because actually I started my career before I even got my first job as an engineer, and before college, I actually had a couple of jobs doing support. So it was easier for me to communicate with customers than it was with my colleagues. So I spent a lot of time in the support room, and customers loved me, and I was able to troubleshoot quite a lot of things really quickly, and support always needs someone to escalate to. So I was, that go-to person to escalate things to. You could say I was like, almost always on call on the one hand, but on the other hand, I had a lot to learn on how to work with other people at the company. And gradually, as I was able to become better and better at that, I started getting managerial responsibilities and eventually managed about half of the engineering team at the startup I was working at. And at some point, I actually did something completely different and left the world of engineering. And, spending all of that time in support, I realized that there's an interesting opportunity for us to do some professional services for our clients. Got into that, did a lot of that. It was a great experience and definitely prepared me for some of the later stages in my career, but eventually went back to the world of engineering and then, joined Handy to manage that engineering team.
Amazing. So I guess being open to the opportunities that are presented to you, and identifying things that you enjoy doing more or less, and being able to learn from them. And then also at some point taking a step back and thinking, okay, this is what I've done so far. Is this what I want to continue doing, or do I want to move on to the next thing? So having some kind of the capacity of like zooming out every so often and seeing, okay, this has been happening for a few years now. Is this what I want to continue doing or not?
Yeah. I would say, when you're doing that reflection every couple of years or whatever is the right cadence for you, I would say ask yourself two questions. One is, am I on the right track? So I was on a managerial track, which back in the day was kind of like the only real way to get ahead. But I'm really glad to see that a lot of companies are opening up to the idea of the individual contributor track as a way to become more senior. You don't have to manage people if you don't want. Managing is a completely different skill. Being good at your job doesn't mean you're good as a manager, and vice versa. So always think, am I on the right track? And then the other thing that I found really helpful is that you ask yourself, what are the things I'm good at? What are the things I'm not good at but can improve on? And what are the things I'm not good at and would never improve on? Like for me, I am not good in graphics, and I will never be good in graphics. Like if you give me a pencil, I can't even draw a straight line. And I was never a good front-end engineer as a result. I can't really do CSS in a good way. Like I understand it, but I'm not like if you ask me to build the framework for like a UI framework, I could potentially do that. But if you ask me to write CSS and HTML, I'm really bad at it. And I know I'll never actually be, way better than where I am today. But when it came to, like I said, all these soft skills, I knew I could be better at them. So I knew these are the things I want to improve on and should improve on.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. What like if you could recommend to like people that are in their careers now, any resources that you relied on during your career or things that you continue to do today and to continue to self-develop and learn, what would you recommend?
Yeah, so I'm hoping I'm not preempting another question again, but I would say find a good mentor. That's like step number one. If your manager is an amazing mentor, great. If there's someone very senior in your team or your company that's not your manager, that's also great. And if you need to look outside of your company, go for it. But definitely find someone who could mentor you, who you think you could learn a lot from. Eventually, engineering in many respects is sort of an apprenticeship model. And you need to be the apprentice of a good master. So find someone who you believe in, who could point you in the right direction, who could give you feedback, honest feedback, which is really hard to come by. Who could help you, with that question of what you're good at and could improve on, and sorry, what you're not good at and could improve on, and what you're not good at and would never improve on. So, having someone being that mirror for you and telling you the honest truth is super important. Good mentors are great listeners, by the way, and sometimes all they need to do is just repeat what you're saying and reflect it to you in a slightly different way, and that in itself is amazing. So that's one. As you're climbing up the ranks, whether it's on the individual contributor or IC track or as a manager, it becomes harder and harder to find mentors within your company. That's when you look outside of your company, but also that's when you start thinking about peer groups who can help you. So as a CEO, for example, it's really hard to find a mentor, but it's really easy to find peer groups of other CEOs where I can, share my experience and learn from the experience of others. So peer groups are great. And I always say that I think the most important thing for anyone is curiosity. I mean, the most important thing, like for career progression, is curiosity. So if you're curious, you'll always find good resources, whether they're online, offline, whatever. As a kid, I would pick up an encyclopedia, read about something, and it would be really cool. And then I browse to another value that I want to read about, or another term that I want to read about, and very quickly I'll run out of fingers to hold like the pages of the stack that I've built that I need to go back in. It's easier today with Wikipedia and tabs, so you can open up as many tabs as you want.
Definitely.
Yeah, but just be curious. Think about what you want to learn, and figure out the best ways to learn them. And if you've learned them, figure out the best way to practice them, because practice is just as important as learning. Something that you've learned but never practiced is meaningless. There's a phrase in Hebrew about learning how to swim through correspondence. And no one manages to stay afloat if all they've done is learn swimming through correspondence. You need to actually get in the water and practice it. And that applies to any skill that you're trying to develop.
There's a lot of reflections here, and I don't think they apply only to engineering. I think even myself, I relate to a lot of the things that you were saying. And before wrapping it up, I want to ask one last question, which is how does it actually two more? One is how does the beginning of your career tie into where you are today? And if you go back to that young On that was starting his first job and grew a big ego because of his situation at the team, what would you tell him? And do you think if he was looking forward the years that passed, if he would have imagined himself being where he is today?
Wow, such a good question. So first of all, if I go back to that version of me, the first thing I would say is it's going to be okay, because it's easy to really, panic especially on your first day on the job, right? So first of all, I would say it's going to be okay. And everyone who's in this room or in this office with you has gone through the same thing. They all had their first day. They were all scared. They all didn't know what's going to happen. It's going to be okay. And the second thing I would say is look around you and figure out who are the people you can learn the most from. And, apart from trying to be as nice to them as you can, also, try to maximize what you can do with them, and also build your career in a way that you can be that kind of person to others in the future. You start your career mostly, taking mentorship from other people. You end your career mostly giving mentorship to other people. And in between, you have stages where you're doing some of that and some of that. So just look around you. Who are your role models? Who are the people that are going to influence you, and how would you become one of them?
That's deep. But I agree. This is personally, it's an exercise that I do all the time, and I'm lucky enough that I do work with people that I see as role models. So I think the goal of the session today was not so much talk about WIlco and what we're building and why we're doing it. And I think that what you've shared about your experience and where it all started kind of connects very much with what we're doing at WIlco and how we're helping people that are joining their first day in the company, or that are in year 2, but they're clueless because they just switched teams, have a safe environment where to practice and make mistakes and not feel overwhelmed and intimidated by what they have in front. But I think the main message from the last 30 minutes is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm learning the most from your experience is to keep an open mind, understand that things are ever changing, taking a step back from time to time, and surrounding yourself with people that you trust, that you can look up to. Because in the end, but also as a person, the only way to build a great person is by surrounding yourself by great people too. I'm lucky enough that you're building that at WIlco, so we're seeing it every day.
Thank you.
But
it's actually, by the way, sorry for cutting you, but it's a really good point what you said about adapting to change. And especially in tech, where things change so quickly, it's really important to not get hung up on a specific piece of technology or anything like that. Don't say you're a JavaScript or a Python engineer. Pick up the skills that could help you with any language. Pick up the skills that could help you in any stack. The specific language is just not important. It's going to change. Technology is going to change. ChatGPT came out a month ago, and now every developer is using that to build a boilerplate for them. So, whoever spent so much time learning how to do the boilerplate, great for them, but that might not be as needed anymore in the future. So just always think about the skills that are generic, and first of all, soft skills are always going to be needed. And like we said, surrounding yourself with good people is always going to help. But also try to think through the things that are always relevant. Like systems are just going to become more and more scalable, for example. So dealing with scale, here's an example of a skill that you'll most likely need to develop throughout your entire career, and nothing is going to change that. I mean, who knows? But so far, I think nothing's going to change that. Security threats are always going to come up. That's another skill that's probably not going to change a lot. So, really focus on those rather than the fads that are today. The UI framework that you have today is not going to be the same in 10 years. Don't get too hung up on that.
And I guess that's the perfect closing message for this session. So thank you very much, On, for sharing and for making the time.
Alex.
With pleasure. This was actually super interesting. So it was really fun to be a part of this. Thank you. And
thank you so much, everyone.
Exactly. Thanks to whoever is listening and for the future listeners, and see you back on WIlco very soon. Bye.